Episode 7, Blind Spots. We begin at Vector Academy on Zenith, a techno-magic college which currently finds itself under attack. The Owls of Diamond are here, and the Trix' new nature magic spells, stolen from Marigold Institute, prove effective against the school's techno-droids. Once the attack is over, the Trix absorb the power of the school's techno-magic heart, and more than half of the students are recruited into their coven. We then cut to Cloud Tower, where Lucy and Nut are giving the young Elphia students the grand tour. None of the fairies seem particularly at home. The witch students pick up on this and begin teasing the fairies, to which one of the fairies, Lazuli, Fairy of the Sea, snaps back how she's expected to feel comfortable in a place run by evil witches like the Trix. It gets very uncomfortable real quick. Thankfully, Roxy calls her out, saying that the Trix are the exception and not the rule. Headmistress Griffin and plenty of other witches prove that witches can and have fought for good. And if anything, the fact a legendary fairy like Cleriel helped in the conquest of Alfea shows that fairies are equally capable of evil. The other Winx, meanwhile, have informed Griffin of the events at Marigold Institute. Unfortunately, the potions Flora's mother provided haven't restored their memories. They've had no effect other than giving them all a brief spout of food poisoning, which spurred an argument between Flora and her mother that she found worse than having to rush to the bathroom. In any case, Griffin has new information on the Legendarium. It is a forbidden tome of unknown origin, with the power to bring characters from various myths, legends, and fairy tales to life. It was previously kept under careful watch at the Museum of Magic, but apparently it had been replaced with a convincing forgery that they were not able to notice until Griffin had inquired about the book. It was kept in a section of the museum protected by the power of the 9 nymphs, which causes Bloom to immediately blame herself, as she realizes those protections must have faded when she freed Daphne. Everyone assures Bloom that she did the right thing, and there was no way anyone could have foreseen this turn of events. Still, Bloom is beating herself up. At the very least, now they all know why the Trix have been able to conjure up such powerful entities. Griffin is going to do further research on the Legendarium so they can potentially find a way to counter it. In the meantime, she advises the Winx to stay vigilant and continue trying to gain Ardorix. Flora has suggested that they all start therapy in order to do so, and to help themselves while they're at it. Back in their quarters, the Winx are exhausted. They haven't been sleeping well, having nothing but nightmares of bad memories, which makes Bloom specifically uncomfortable. Aisha wishes Piff was here to help, then explains who the Pixies are and how Piff is the Pixie of Sweet Dreams. Bloom doesn't comment on this, but it's clear she's holding something back. They then talk about what they expect this therapy to be like, which gives them each a chance to check in with how they're feeling about this whole situation. Musa feels like she's already able to vent her feelings out through music, so why would she need any of this? If anything, she wishes she was enjoying her first year at Alfea without the threat of death looming over her. Flora is shocked Musa would say such a thing, to which Musa asks whether Flora anticipated everything that happened at Marigold when she left home for Alfea, to which Flora hesitantly admits she did not. Stella agrees with Musa, especially given the last thing she expected was to be forced to hold up in the infamous witch school. Tecna is the only one who seems fine with all of this, mostly because she's fixated on the logical conclusion that they all must have wanted to become guardian fairies if they were going to attend Alfea, which therefore means they knew they would face life or death situations. Stella rolls her eyes and says, "Yeah, eventually." For them, they haven't even started their first year, and they're already being treated like graduates, and it's ridiculous. On top of this, Stella's not over the old Prince Sky is neither Sky nor a prince thing, since that's basically brand new to her right now. She told Brandon that she needs some time to process this, but she doesn't seem really keen on seeing him again. She'd much rather talk to the actual Prince Sky right now, which makes Bloom a bit uncomfortable. Bloom, having tried to sit this all out, steps in and says Flora and Tecna are right. Whether or not they remember everything, they're still the same people that they were. She catches herself as she says that, which Stella picks up on, asking if she really believes that, as Bloom flashes back to her conversation with Sky at the end of the last season. Musa realizes that Aisha hasn't chimed in, and when they look around, they find that she's vanished. As Bloom runs to find her, she bumps into Roxy as she enters. Real quick, Roxy says she wants to help the Winx on this new mission, but before she can say the rest of her piece, Bloom, seeming to know what she's about to ask, says she has to go find Aisha and runs off, leaving Roxy in the lurch. Stella asks how Roxy knows who they are, and as Roxy says she was the last fairy on Earth, the Winx all go, "Get out of here." Aisha, meanwhile, is wandering the halls of Cloud Tower on her own. She's not too keen on sticking with the other Winx right now, especially as they're arguing endlessly with each other. Before she realizes it, however, she winds up getting turned around, finding herself lost in the winding halls of Cloud Tower. She begins to panic given her fear of the dark, and as she curls up and cries about being all alone, Nex comes across her and helps her up. We then cut to Althea, where all the students are undergoing vigorous magic training. Chimera tries harnessing her Dark Enchantix powers, but finds that she cannot miniaturize. Crystal comments that her Enchantix must be incomplete, given she achieved it through force of will rather than sacrifice. Still, Chimera believes that she will have the power to finish off Stella. Selena, meanwhile, is training directly under the Tricks, beginning with the same exercise Zarathustra had the Winx do. The Tricks explain that while fairies draw their power from all that is light and positive, witches are the opposite. Every bad memory and negative emotion is a fuel to derive your power from, to ensure that your enemies know to never cross you again. Selena is nervous, but Icy ensures Selena that they won't know what she's thinking of. Each of the Tricks knows how personal relying on such memories can be, and as such, they all agree to keep it to themselves, as long as they use their powers to strive towards their shared goal. This helps Selena feel at ease. Very easily, she conjures up a dark sphere of intense negative emotions that grows exponentially. We see the attached memory where a preteen Selena is in middle school, sitting alone at a corner lunch table writing something in her notebook. As if on cue, Mitzi and her friends approach and harass Selena about what she's writing. Selena says that it's none of Mitzi's business, but Mitzi swipes the book and reads it aloud in front of the cafeteria. Everyone laughs as Mitzi recounts the story of the fairy and witch duo Bloom and Selena, and Bloom, meanwhile, simply hangs her head and pretends not to hear as she leaves, while Selena sadly sits as everyone continues to point and laugh at her. In reality, the Tricks are yelling to Selena to stop. The dark sphere is starting to engulf her. Selena tries to stop the spell and panics as she can't. Icy rushes over, telling Selena to focus on her breaths and let the memory pass instead of trying to stop it. She does so, and slowly the sphere dissipates. Selena falls over, and Darcy is impressed by the sheer power of Selena's emotions, while Stormy is excited at the idea of how much havoc she could wreak if she learned to harness it. Icy, however, says that they need to take a break, escorting Selena inside the school so she can rest. Back at Cloud Tower, the Winx are undergoing training of their own, with Griffin trying to sharpen their combat skills. Flora specifically is getting the brunt of it so we can see just what Ardorix is capable of. While fighting, Flora inadvertently summons a magical weapon, a bow staff which can harness the power of all 4 seasons, which Flora fittingly refers to as the Staff of Seasons. Taking a break, Aisha goes off to talk to Nex, thanking him for helping her earlier. When Nex asks, Aisha explains that she's always been afraid of the dark since it reinforces her feeling of being alone. That's probably part of why the idea of listening to your inner darkness makes her feel so uneasy. Nex is the same, especially given his bad experience with dark magic and with witches, on top of what they teach at Light Rock. When Aisha inquires further, Nex says that he'd rather not talk about it and walks off. Back at Althea, Selena has mostly recovered. She asks Icy if she had this problem back when she started learning how to be a witch, and though Icy warns her not to tell her sisters, she admits how awful it was. She'd actually wind up freezing whatever she touched when her emotions became too strong, and it took a long time for her to be able to control her powers, and by extension, control herself. Out of curiosity, Icy asks Selena why she hates Bloom so much. Selena tries to dodge the question and turn it back on Icy, but Icy ain't having it. Careful of what she's about to say, Selena admits that she's from Earth, and noticed herself gaining powers after the Winx had brought magic back. She was a childhood friend of Bloom's, but was left behind and betrayed, and now Selena wants revenge. She wants to take everything Bloom has so she feels what Selena went through. She doesn't have much else going for her since her mother passed around the time their friendship ended, and she hasn't spoken to her father in years. Icy definitely didn't expect such a strong connection, but she relates to that need to make the Winx, especially Bloom, suffer. The Tricks blame the Winx for all of the humiliation that they've suffered over the years, and now with Selena's help, they're going to take everything that should have been theirs from the beginning. Back at Cloud Tower, Nex sits with Headmistress Griffin, who's about to begin the Dark Vision exercise. Griffin is surprised a paladin of all people would request such a thing, but Nex asserts that there's something that's telling him to confront his own darkness. When it begins, we see flashes of a young Nex and Darcy at a different magic school, kidding around and studying together. Darcy continually gets closer to Nex, which makes Nex so uncomfortable, he breaks himself out of the vision and leaves, despite Griffin's insistence that reopening such old wounds without closing them back up is dangerous. The Winx, meanwhile, sit in the hall, anxiously awaiting their therapy sessions, not speaking to each other. Bloom breaks the silence, asking if Aisha is okay after getting lost earlier, to which Aisha says, not even making eye contact, she's fine. Bloom tries to talk about how she knows this is hard, and Aisha immediately stops her, saying, "You don't know how I feel. Leave that to the shrink, okay?" Tecna tries to interject, saying that Aisha most likely feels alone, given she clearly wasn't around from the very beginning like the others, on top of the confusion everyone else already feels. Aisha snaps at Tecna, saying that she doesn't need anyone psychoanalyzing her, and telling Tecna she'd be better off focusing on her own emotions, that she's not even aware of. Tecna pauses, taking a moment to consider what Aisha said, albeit clearly upset and not knowing exactly why. We then begin a sequence in which we cut between each Winx's therapy session with Professor Zarathustra. Now, thankfully, Nutelia has been helping with her background in psychology and women's issues, as she was a big help with the Flora episodes, so that's really going to help as we explore the Winx seeking out therapy. Specifically, these sessions with Zarathustra are... well, what happens when you get a bad therapist who's focused purely on the academics of cognitive behavioral therapy, but not actually the feelings driving your behavior and mental health problems? Zarathustra isn't really concerned with the Winx as people or asking about their feelings. Instead, she's more focused on trying to force them to remember what they've lost, and when they try to shift conversation, Zarathustra ignores their feelings. Specifically, she scoffs at Bloom when she says she doesn't feel in control or happy, saying that as the leader of the Winx who has accomplished so much, she's probably just overreacting to everything that's happened to her. What really takes the cake, though, is when she starts talking about herself and her own experiences in learning how to deal with people's mental health, and even talks about other patients she's had and sharing confidential details about their lives. At one point, she'd probably talk shit about one of the Winx to another, and even without their memories, they would go, "Are you talking about Bloom?" Tecna gets most of the focus, though. She admits she's always struggled understanding emotions, both her own and the emotions of others. She was always taught by her parents that rationality reigns supreme, and that the people of Zenith pride themselves on not being controlled by trivial emotions. But now she's wondering if that's just something they tell themselves so that they don't have to deal with their emotions. Of course, she's saying all this on her own while Zarathustra is busy on her phone, not even listening whatsoever, and even misremembering her name as Tina. Afterwards, the Winx are grateful their therapy sessions are over, but they're not exactly keen on talking about them. Right on cue, Roxy shows up to talk to Bloom with no interruptions this time. She asks Bloom for a piece of the dragon flame. If she's going to help them, she needs to be at the same level of power as the rest of them. Bloom says that it's far too dangerous for how inexperienced Roxy is. Roxy asks where the sphere was when she got Cyrenix and helped them to fight Tritanus and Politeia, but Bloom argues that was different, not explaining how exactly. Bloom then says Roxy's still a beginning fairy, and she hasn't even earned Charmix or Enchantix. That aggravates Roxy further, as she's explained how Earth fairy magic works to Bloom before, and Bloom clearly hasn't cared enough to remember, and would rather write Roxy off. Still, Bloom refuses to give her a piece of the Dragon Flame, wanting to keep Roxy as far away from the tricks and the Legendarium as possible. Frustrated, Roxy admits that it seems there are only 6 Winx after all, and storms off. Tecna, meanwhile, quietly leaves the room, only for Flora to catch her off guard, asking what she's up to. Tecna admits that she wants to go back to Zenith. She realizes that she needs to confront her parents about something, and when Flora asks if she would like company, Tecna agrees. After all, Flora has just dealt with some family drama of her own, so Tecna figures Flora would make for a good reference. Back at Althea, Icy and Selena catch up with Darcy and Stormy, who found that the location spell has found their next target, an old stuffed teddy bear of Tecna's, now kept in the Zenith Royal Palace. Episode 8: The Origin. We begin with a flashback of a young Tecna being lectured by her parents, Electronio and Magnethia. Her teacher called saying she brought a toy with her to school, a stuffed dog that talks when you squeeze its hand. Tecna explains that it's hard for her to focus without Snowball, confusing her parents until they realize she's actually named the toy. When her parents ask for a concrete reason as to why she needs the bear, Tecna can't answer, unable to explain herself. Magnethia moves to grab Snowball, but Tecna swats her hand away and picks him up. Electronio scolds her, trying to take it away from her, but Tecna fights back, running back to her room and barricading the door. Her parents are exhausted, but agree they need to do something. Tecna meanwhile lays on her bed, with Snowball, tearing up. She says to Snowball that she's not sure what's happening to her, but no matter what, she won't let anything happen to him. Back in the present, Tecna and Flora have arrived on Zenith. Tecna's incredibly nervous about seeing her parents. She has no idea what her relationship with them is like now, and the last time she recalls interacting with them, it was sneaking out of the house to avoid interacting with them before she left for Althea. Flora says she knows the feeling, but she believes family is family, and that Tecna's parents will make the effort if she meets them halfway. Tecna is not so sure, and neither is Flora by the time that they get to Tecna's parents' house. They don't open the door to greet them, but rather appear via holographic projections. They are incredibly frustrated that Tecna hasn't contacted them since the news of what happened to Althea. Flora insists that they can explain, but Tecna's parents say they don't want to hear any excuses. It's only when Tecna asserts herself and says she needs to talk with them that they relent, open the door, and let them inside. Back at Cloud Tower, Bloom's only just now seen the text from Flora about her and Tecna's plans. She paces back and forth, to which Aisha asks if Bloom is used to them all being attached at the hip. Musa suggests that maybe Tecna had the right idea and they should all head home, at least for the time being. Bloom is very much against that, saying that they have to stick together to face the tricks. After all, they swore to the Great Dragon they would gain Ardorix, but Stella argues that was fresh off the heels of them losing their memories and not knowing what they were getting themselves into. As the argument gets heated, Lucy announces that the Winx have visitors, the Pixies. Aisha's incredibly excited to see them all, especially Piff, but Stella and Musa don't remember Amore or Toon at all. Bloom confirms that they are all indeed bonded to the Pixies, and Aisha jokes that of course Lockette would be bonded to Bloom. Lockette is sweet, but she's also timid, easy for someone like Bloom to push around. Bloom doesn't bother responding, but it's clear she's not in a good state of mind. She pulls Lockette to the side and says she has an idea on how they can restore the other Winx's memories, and Lockette is clearly anxious. Roxy, meanwhile, reunites with Zing, who talks shit about the fact that Bloom is so bent on excluding Roxy from the Winx. She's also with Macy and Nut, who agree that Roxy can handle herself, though Macy is surprised Bloom would act this way. Roxy admits that she's always looked up to Bloom like a big sister, but ever since she got to Althea, even last year, things have changed. She finds herself always needing to prove herself to Bloom, and moreover, she can feel herself becoming more tense when Bloom is around, always second-guessing her words and actions. Right on cue, Griffin approaches them, telling Roxy that if she truly feels stifled by Bloom, then she should go where her company feels welcomed. She's heard much about the young fairy of animals from Faragonda, and believes that Roxy is a strong-willed girl like Bloom, but without that insufferable air of self-righteousness. She believes Roxy will go far, but only if she stands in her power and stands her ground. At Red Fountain, meanwhile, the specialists train with their new weapons. Nex says that these weapons are more than their old Phanta blades, and using them that way will prevent them from accessing their full potential. Though the specialists are taught not to rely on magic, a small spark of it exists in each of them. Not enough to be wizards, fairies, or witches, but enough for them to keep up with the best of them. Riven in particular struggles with his weapons, which Nex explains is connected to his emotions. There's likely something Riven refuses to acknowledge about himself, and as such, he can't reach his full potential. Riven takes this to heart. We cut back to Zenith, where Flora and Tecna have explained the whole situation to Tecna's parents, and the girls have learned about the Trix's attack on Vector Academy, where Tecna's parents actually sent her to before she attended Althea. Right away, Electronio and Magnethia start brainstorming ideas on how to restore the Winx's memories. When Flora mentions how her mother tried doing the same with her potions, they dismiss it as archaic Linfaean nonsense, unsurprised that they failed. Tecna says that she didn't come here to ask for help in restoring her memories. She came here to talk to her parents about how she feels about the way that they've treated her, and when they ask why she would behave so irrationally, she explains they've started therapy, which makes Electronio and Magnethia burst into laughter. They explain that on Zenith, there is no therapy. There's only logistic problem solving of actual problems. The people of Zenith pride themselves on their rationality, and as such, they never find themselves at the whim of mere emotions. At least so they say. Tecna bites back that they seem pretty influenced by their arrogance right now. Her parents ask how dare she could say something like that, and Tecna explains that she's simply stating her observations. Since she was little, they never gave her the tools to understand her emotions. They just ignore what they feel, disguising their discomfort through rationalizing and blame. They couldn't even let her keep a simple toy that made her feel comfortable. Tecna begins tearing up, then dismisses herself to the bathroom, leaving Flora awkwardly listening to Electronio and Magnethia rant about how the Winx and Magix have ruined Tecna, and likely that Timmy boy as well. While she's in the bathroom, Tecna can't help herself from crying. Unexpectedly, a memory rushes back from after she returned to Althea from the Omega Dimension. Though she was grateful to be back with Timmy and the Winx, she had tried reaching out to her parents only for them to completely ignore her. She leaves the bathroom as an alarm goes off. The entire city is under high alert, urging citizens to seek shelter and asking any guardian fairies to report to the capital. They head outside where they see the flying Althea in the distance approaching the Zenith Royal Palace. Flora sends Bloom a text that the Trix are here, and once they transform, they head off, leaving Electronio and Magnethia distraught. At Althea, meanwhile, the Trix prepare to descend, but first need something powerful to back them up and turn Zenith's advanced technomagic against them. Selena has got them covered. From the Legendarium, she summons the Origin, a being of primordial techno-magic, said to have created Zenith's techno-magic core, and techno-magic itself. It is said to be an entity of pure reason, and as such becomes enraged when it senses something different about the city's power grid, the one that Tecna created last season using her Aura of Sirenic spell. And so, Selena sends the Origin to wreak havoc and dismantle Zenith's systems from within. Tecna and Flora try to head it off, with Tecna realizing what it is quickly. The Origin recognizes that the energy he feels from the city is the same as the magic that Tecna uses. Once he's sure that she is behind how Zenith has changed, the Origin moves to destroy the city's power grid. And so Tecna rushes inside the palace after it. Before Flora can follow, the Tricks head her off, but thankfully, this gives Flora the chance to test drive her new Ardorix powers. Back at Cloud Tower, Bloom and Stella head back to their dorms after another session with Professor Zarathustra. She told Bloom that she's just making up all these imaginary problems and she needs to calm down. And she told Stella that her sun and moon powers were far too confusing and that she should just choose one. Needless to say, neither is happy, but they do commiserate for a bit, which makes Bloom incredibly happy. Anyhow, Stella is beat and decides to take a nap, while Bloom says she's going to do some sketching. Stella suggests that maybe Bloom can help with some fashion sketches later on, and after Bloom nods, Stella nods off. Once Stella is out, Bloom whispers for Laquette and Piff. Laquette carries the snoozing Piff over, asking if Bloom is really sure about this. Bloom says that with the combined powers of the pixies of portals and sweet dreams, it's their best chance at reawakening the memories dormant in the other Winx, and they need to try it every chance that they get. Relenting, Laquette and Piff begin the spell, entering Stella's dream. Laquette, having to navigate around golden chains, sees Stella witnessing her parents fighting, and she sits in her room quietly crying. Outside, Musa and Aisha get back early from their session, and Aisha is immediately curious as to why Piff and Laquette are using their magic on Stella. Bloom explains that Stella wasn't feeling well, but when Aisha moves to get Piff, Bloom stands in her way. This makes Stella stir, and she's teared up from the particularly vivid nightmare. She's confused as to why she now has a headache and why everyone is so upset, and Aisha quickly pieces together what's happened. Bloom admits the truth, and the others are pissed, especially Aisha. They ask Bloom how she could be so heartless and invasive, and when Bloom explains she was just trying to help them, Stella corrects her that she was just trying to help herself. Things get awkward as Roxy stands outside the doorway, saying that Zenith is under attack by the Tricks. Bloom checks her phone to realize that she missed Flora's text. The other Winx decide to go help Flora and Tecna, and to use this as a chance to work off some steam, and so they head off, and Roxy accompanies them, much to Bloom's dismay. At Red Fountain, the specialists also get word of the situation and rush out. Riven is clearly nervous given he feels he can't fully use his weapon, but Roy assures him that they've got each other's backs, whatever happens. Nex, meanwhile, hangs back, deciding to let the specialists test their skills on their own, and also because he's nervous of running into Darcy again. Back on Zenith, Flora is still battling the Tricks. She doesn't recall much of her combat experience, yet she keeps flashing back to different times she's nearly died or been seriously injured over the years. On top of that, the lack of nature on Zenith winds up making combat incredibly difficult for her since she's not around her power source, forcing her to rely solely on her new Ardorix weapon, which, admittedly, she's still kicking ass a bit. Thankfully, the other Winx, along with the specialists, arrive to help, and Roxy heads inside the palace to find and help Tecna. Inside the palace, Selena searches Electronio's lab near the power grid's core. As soon as she finds Snowball, confused as to why anyone would keep such a ratty old thing, the Origin enters. Tecna follows shortly thereafter, but is unable to hold her ground with the Origin. As it gets closer to the power grid, the Origin becomes curious as to how such an irrational power source could support Zenith. Instead of destroying the source, he absorbs it, and from that becomes even stronger. It's at that moment that Tecna spots Selena, demanding to know why she's going through her father's things. She immediately recognizes Snowball, and spotting the book on Selena's belt, she supposes she must be the Selena who carried the Legendarium. Before Selena can escape, Tecna rushes her, able to grab both items. Unfortunately, Selena calls back the Legendarium to her hand, revealing it cannot be taken from the owner by force. Selena then orders the Origin to retrieve Snowball. Catching on that somehow this toy is part of the Trix's plan, and wanting to defend something important to her, Tecna rushes out as the Origin gives chase. Before Selena can follow, Roxy heads her off. They fight for a bit, and Roxy's more than capable of holding her own and is enjoying the shot at a rematch, until Selena manages to hold her down with the Cositis spell from the Legendarium, trapping her in water and ice. Given Roxy was the last fairy on Earth, Selena is interested in some of the knowledge that she holds, namely the location of the White Circle. When Roxy refuses to tell her, Selena says she has methods of finding what she wants through the river Memazine. Besides, she would need to use the power of Lethe on Roxy anyway, given it appears she missed a Winx. Tecna, meanwhile, is headed off when the Origin hacks into the palace's security systems, effectively locking her inside and turning all the Techno droids against her. The Origin laughs, saying that Tecna is quite the fascinating creature, born in a world of logic and reason and still unable to escape her irrationality, even when she's unable to understand when it takes hold. He asserts that the bear is nothing more than a toy, yet it holds so much significance and power to both her and the ones who summon the Origin. It honestly infuriates him, especially now that Tecna's irrationality is part of the Origin's. He attacks, seizing Snowball and tearing him to shreds. In that moment, Tecna flashes back to her younger self again. She's in a Vector Academy uniform and has finally returned home after being sent away for a whole school year. She rushes inside, then immediately stands up straight and speaks as clearly as possible to her parents. When she goes to her room, however, she finds Snowball is missing. Her parents admit that they threw it away, which throws Tecna into a fit of tear-filled rage. She immediately packs her things back into her suitcase and heads for the door. They try to stop her, holding the bag and pulling, only for Tecna to let go and dash out the door. She runs off as they call out to her. Back in the present, Tecna's look of shock turns to rage. The Origin moves to destroy her, only for Tecna to release purple flames which burn away the Techno droids. Her power sparks and she transforms into Ardorix. Tecna then summons her Ardorix weapon, the Double Helix Chain, a DNA-themed whip sword. She kicks the Origin's ass, then says that it has something which belongs to her. She rips the Technomagic core out of the Origin's chest, restoring Zenith's power grid. She then uses her fairy dust bottle to absorb the Origin's lightning, causing it to fade away. Once the Trix catch on to what's happened, they return to Althea and escape. Selena is there waiting for them, but thankfully, Selena managed to grab the voice box that fell out of Snowball. Darcy summons the box that they've been keeping the rose in, and Selena places the voice box inside. Back on Zenith, King Cryos thanks the Winx for saving their world yet again. That victory is cut short as Electronio and Magnethia arrive, and Tecna immediately calls them out for how they treated her. They may be her parents, but she doesn't owe them a relationship if they're going to trample on everything that she cares about. They're confused as to what she means, but Tecna is not in the mood for explanations right now, sending them off. Roxy, meanwhile, has lost her memories, and is completely flabbergasted by everything around her. She thinks she's dreaming and is sure she'll wake up soon, and when Bloom tries to reinforce to Roxy that she is a fairy, Roxy tells her to get away from her, clearly upsetting Bloom. Stella says that Roxy has a good judge of character. Before Bloom can defend herself, Aisha cuts her off, saying that they just want to go back to Cloud Tower and rest. Once they return, they'll have plenty to say about what Bloom has done.